We have been discussing about the peering and interconnection quite heavily since morning. So next we go to the discussion, next we go to the presentation on the largest peering database, which is PeeringDB from Arnold, who will be talking about the PeeringDB, and probably that will give you an encouragement to sign up at PeeringDB if you run an AS number and interconnect with the networks. Do you want?
I'm happy to be here, and I would like to talk about PeeringDB. And as the title already says, PeeringDB has to do with one with peering or with interconnection, and the other hand is the DB, the database. So basically, what is PeeringDB? PeeringDB is a database where you store all the information which you need for interconnection. And basically, these are three items what you need to do interconnection. Of course, the internet consists of autonomous systems, or how we call it in PeeringDB of networks. This is the first component. The second component is if you want to interconnect, it makes sense to be in some collocations, or how we call it, facility. And last but not least, you already have heard about it, it makes sense to not always interconnect on a bilateral basis, but to use Internet Exchange Point to interconnect via the common infrastructure. So these are basically the three components. We have networks in PeeringDB, we have facilities in PeeringDB, and we have Internet Exchange Points in PeeringDB. And why is it a good idea to be in PeeringDB? Of course, is you as a network, you want to interconnect. So that means you want to make you known to the outside world. You want to let other people know what your peering policy is, what your contact information is, where the networks, the other networks are able to reach you, in which facilities you are, and so on and so on. These are for the networks. Of course, for the facilities, they want to show which networks are available at their facility itself. And last but not least, also for the internet exchanges, they want to show in which facilities you may interconnect, you may connect to their internet exchange. And nowadays, as everything is automated, especially the large network, they want you to have a PeeringDB entry, because they say if we don't have a PeeringDB entry, we are not able to pull that information from PeeringDB, and we are not able to pre-configure our PeeringDB sessions. And as long as you do not have a PeeringDB entry, we will not peer with you. So basically, as soon as you have an autonomous system, a facility, or run an internet exchange, just look up PeeringDB, register, put in your information, and keep it up to date. So what I've also done is I looked a little bit deeper into what I found in PeeringDB about India and its neighbors. So we have India over here, and you see a lot of columns. You see first column is or second column, the number of IXs, the number of facilities I found in PeeringDB, the number of networks at the IXs, then the networks, number of networks in facilities, and number totals. And also the total networks in PeeringDB, not necessarily related to this information, but related to the country, which is different, of course, for example, from networks at the IXs, because the networks at an IX here in India, they may also come from outside India. So this is different. So this means this network's total is different from networks in PeeringDB, because there might be networks which are in PeeringDB coming from India, but do not yet show that they are at some facility or that they are connected at an IX. And last, in the last column, what you see is I took that information from the RIRs, in this case from IPNIC. This shows the total numbers of networks which are assigned to these countries. And if we look at India, we have a total of 23 IXs all around India. Basically, they are run by the guys who were sitting over here. They are run by NIXI, ExtremeIX, and by DEC-IX. And I guess there are also a couple of small IXs around India, which is pretty good. Also, the number of facilities is pretty good. The number of networks, definitely, from my impression, could be higher. Numbers in facility, maybe also, but it's a good number. What you see is, of course, the numbers total is not exactly the sum of what are connected to an IX and what is in facilities, because some of the networks are both connected to an IX and connected to a facilities. There might always be a difference, because what we also see is that networks connect into an IX from outside the country, so that means they do not necessarily have representation at the facilities. Otherwise, I guess all of the Indian networks, for example, they should also be at the facilities and perhaps also, hopefully, connected to an IX. But if we look around, we also see that there are countries, neighboring countries, which, for example, Pakistan, I guess it has one, it has an internet exchange, but for some reason it is not in PeeringDB. We are also the Maldives. This is Sri Lanka, which does not yet have one. Bhutan has one. China has also a decent amount of peering internet exchanges, Myanmar, Nepal. So the situation in India, I would say, is good. 23 internet exchanges, not that bad. But given for the size of the country, it definitely could and should be more. But I'm pretty sure when I'm here, let's say in 2 years' time, there might be that there are 50 internet exchanges. And 50 internet exchanges is not too much. If we look at, for example, in the US, which has, I guess, 1/4 of the population, or even less, there are more than 100 internet exchanges. So connectivity is all what we need in nowadays when we do internet. So far to the situation from a point of view of PeeringDB. Coming back to our database. So basically, our database has interface for the human beings, the graphical user interface. And here is what we see for our organization, NIXI. This is the organization. And what it also shows is, if you go to an organization, the number of facilities which are run by this organization. For example, NIXI has one facility. Then the number of networks which are owned by this organization, which is in this case one network, and NIXI has a total of 7 internet exchanges. And what you can see over here is every information is URL. That means you can click on it and then you get to the next level. For example, this is the NIXI. I can't read it. If you click at it, you get on the internet exchange, and then at this internet exchange, you see the list of the networks. What we also have, and I already mentioned, is automation is what people nowadays do. We have an API. This API is a RESTful API, and it supports everything. You can read the objects, you can create, update, and delete it. So basically, you can do the same as via the graphical user interface. And even from my perspective, it's even more powerful because if you want to retrieve, for example, information, it's way more powerful than the graphical user interface. And I already mentioned it in the beginning, that we have information about the networks, the facilities, and then the internet exchange points. But these are, and then the organization. These are the so-called basic types, but then we also need information about in which facilities are the internet exchanges. What is the LAN address of the internet exchange? Which prefixes are on the internet exchange? Then also in which facilities are the network, and also at which internet exchange points are the networks. And these are the so-called derived types. For example, NetIX LANs. These are records where we have a combination of information about an internet exchange point. Then we have the network, that means the ASN. And then we have the IPv4 address, which the network have on this internet exchange, the IPv6 address. Then the speed with which it is connected to the internet exchange. And last but not least, the information whether it's peering with the route server or not. There is the information on the API over here, and also a not so intensive, or could be more information on the specification. So this is a quick example how you could query with CURL. You just, like the graphical user interface, the only thing which you have to insert is the word API, and then you get the same information. For example, what you can do on the graphical user interface to query all networks, you can do with the API. Then you really get a list of all networks. If you want to single out a specific network, you have to add the network identifier. And what you also can do is to limit it to a certain dash. You can limit it to certain fields, like here, where I only retrieve the information about the ID, the org ID, organization ID, the name, the ASN, and when it was created and updated. So what is PeeringDB in terms of the organization itself? So PeeringDB itself is around since 15 years or even longer, and roughly 5 years ago, some people found out that PeeringDB is really crucial for interconnecting and having information for interconnection, and therefore decided to set up an association. This association is based in the US, and who is able to become a member of the association? Almost everyone. So the only thing what you have to have is you have to have a record in PeeringDB, which makes sense. That means you have either to have a network, run a facility, or run an internet exchange. And the second thing only is you have to subscribe to our government mailing list, and that's all. As soon as you do that, you or your organization is a member of the association. And when you are a member of PeeringDB, you are able to vote and also to be voted on the board. So looking more into the structure, of course, the PeeringDB has a board. The board is basically more looking in the long-time decisions and the structure of PeeringDB, and to ensure strategic planning, 2-3 years planning basically, and taking care that there is enough money to run PeeringDB. But the day-to-day work of PeeringDB is running by what we call committees, and what in larger companies or companies would be departments. So first is the admin department, which more or less is our support department. Whenever you want to register an object, if you register your ASN or a facility or an internet exchange, this would basically create a ticket in our support department. For networks, it's quite easy, because if you have an ASN, what we do is we look up the ASN information in the RIR, and if we can match the requested email address to an email address which we find in the RIR, then the creation of the object is automatically approved. If we cannot find it, then it definitely pops up a ticket in PeeringDB, and then a member of the AC has to look into it. The same is if you want to register an internet exchange point. So there are various definitions of what an internet exchange point is. So what we are currently also working on, maybe a better definition, what we are currently using is sort of what is defined by IXF, which is the roof of organization of Internet Exchange Points organization. For this region, this is APIX, where also, for example, NIXI belongs to and ExtremeIX belongs to. They have a definition what an Internet Exchange Point is. But what we've found out that it's still too vague. So recently we saw registration of so-called virtual Internet Exchange Points. So what is this? So someone sets up a virtual switch, and then networks connect to this virtual switch. Is this really an Internet Exchange Point, or does an Internet Exchange Point really need a physical infrastructure? And if you have a physical infrastructure, you can have perhaps multiple exchange points on the same physical infrastructure. So it's not necessarily that easy to define exactly what an internet exchange is. So next is what we have the operations committee. So as said, there is a database, we have a website, there are other servers behind it, we have load sharing. Currently, we are running everything in the cloud, so there have to be someone who takes care of this operation, and this is what the ops committee is doing. The next is the outreach committee, which basically is our marketing department. So this manages marketing in social media, Twitters, Facebook, and so on and so on. Also takes care, if there is an event, asking around, is someone of PeeringDB at this event? For example, I'm currently here, and I say, okay, and every event where one of PeeringDB is, we try to get a slot to evangelize about PeeringDB. And then, last but not least, is the product committee. And this might be perhaps the most important one, because what does the product committee do? So PeeringDB itself, it's not set in stone, so that we said 3 years ago, this is PeeringDB, be happy, and that's it. First of all, the code has bugs, and this needs bug fixing. But more important is, it's not 100% perfect. So we have a lot of users. The users, they have great ideas. They say, oh, I want this feature, I want that information, and so on and so on. And this is what we are needing for PeeringDB to develop to get better and better, and finally, excellent. So this is basically having a roadmap, having new features, and so on and so on. And this is what product committee is doing. We are using GitHub for it. Whenever you're working with PeeringDB and you come across an idea, just go to GitHub, open an issue, and say, this is something I want to have implemented. Or if you are using PeeringDB, you find a typo or you find a really serious bug, also go to GitHub and say, this is a bug, please fix it. Because of the importance of developing PeeringDB, we decided to hire our first employee, and this is Felice, which you perhaps may know from the industry. So Felice joined PeeringDB as the product manager at 1st of April, and her responsibility is really to take care of what I talked about the product management, about the features. So first of all, what she has to do is to create a roadmap and make this roadmap then known to the marketing, to the outside world. And also, currently, I guess we have around 150 issues sitting in GitHub, which are waiting to be worked on. So just to shepherd the discussion, bring it forward to a consensus, and when there is a consensus, also how to implement it, and then also make the implementation and finally roll it out. This is also statistics on PeeringDB. As said, PeeringDB is around since 15th year, but what we did is we wrote PeeringDB completely new from scratch and released it in March 2016. And what you see since then is an increase in number of tickets. And as I mentioned, the tickets does not mean that there are problems with PeeringDB. The tickets are basically always, I would say, 95 to 99% coming from creation of new objects, from networks, from facilities, and in exchanges. So currently, since then, what we are seeing, roughly, we have 30 tickets per day to work on, which is quite amazing because what you see over here also, the admin committee consists only of volunteers. That means of people who are doing this job beside their day-to-day work, which they have. So does PeeringDB cost money? Definitely it does. To run the infrastructure costs money, not that much, but what costs more money is to develop new features. It does not cost any money to the users. I guess there are two reasons. One reason is we really want that everyone is using PeeringDB, but the second one is also there are hundreds of thousands of users of PeeringDB, and it's impossible to track who is it using it. And we want also that everyone puts in his information, and if we would make it not for free, no one says, no, it's not that important that I'm on PeeringDB, so I do not register. So instead, our model is on sponsorships, and what I already mentioned in the beginning is the larger networks, they say, if you want to peer with me, I'm happy to do so, but please register with PeeringDB. What is their incentive? Their incentive is, if all their peers are on PeeringDB, they can simply pull all the information from that and configure their routers according to what they found in PeeringDB. What would be the alternative? The alternative would be to get thousands of emails, I want to peer with you. And then you have to write back, yes, I'm willing, but what is your IP address? What is your ASN? What is your asset? And so on and so on. What is your contact information? So this means the big benefit for them is that they have structured information. They simply can pull it that often they need it, and it's as accurate because the user itself is maintaining the information. And this is worth them to also sponsor PeeringDB. We have different sponsor levels. They start as low as $200 per month and go up as high as $25,000 per year. This is the list of our sponsors, and as you can see, the large sponsors, these are the large networks which really benefit from it and are also willing to give back to the community, to this community project, the money to have it run next year as well. So now to certain features or what we have done in the past. One is when we created or rebranded or brought PeeringDB out, PeeringDB 2.0 as we call it, 3.5 years ago, our basic goal was to have functionality, to have everything in place and not so much that it looks nice. We even didn't have a logo when we relaunched PeeringDB in March 2016. So therefore we decided to have a new brand, have it rebranded, to have a new logo. So the new logo is now this year, this is our logo, together with the word PeeringDB. And the three components should carry the three attributes. First of all is, of course, the database, that it's about interconnection, and also to stress it, almost every information in PeeringDB comes from the users themselves. So if you are a network, you decide whether you want to be registered there or not. You decide which information is there, basically, almost. And also, if you're a facility, you have to put in the information, and you have to maintain it. The same for an IXP. You have to put in the information. There are certain informations which we are currently discussing about. For example, currently, or when we began, the networks had to put in also the IP addresses which they are using at an internet exchange. But who owns the IP address? So when you connect to an internet exchange, basically what the exchange does, it hands it out to you. But what happens if a network leaves PeeringDB and forgets to remove the information? Should it stay there forever? No, this can't be. So we have to decide which information goes there. So a good compromise is you decide, the network decides whether it's on PeeringDB or not. But if you're on PeeringDB, it's under the authority of the exchange to check whether the address you are using or is there is correct or not, because it's the IX which gave you the information about the IP address. And they should know whether it's right or not. And therefore, we have to design with that and user maintain. User maintain, this means wherever this really is your information, you are responsible for it. For example, if you put in the network the asset, which is your contact information, this is something you are responsible for. For the connection to the internet exchange, you decide whether you want to be listed or not. But then still the IX is able to influence the information. If it's wrong, if you, for example, had put in a typo, the exchange is able to correct this. So what we also made already last year is PeeringDB is open source software. So there's also two reasons behind it. One reason is to show you the software which is running PeeringDB, that you are able to look at it, to prove yourself that there is no hidden doors or something. You can really check the software. We also did it before releasing it, that there are no security bugs. And second is, of course, that you want to stimulate everyone to contribute to PeeringDB. You can check out parts, you can add features by yourself, and therefore also adding for benefiting PeeringDB. Maybe it's not that important for India, because everyone, at least in our industry, is able to speak English. But what we also did is, from the very beginning, we had internationalization built in PeeringDB. And the biggest request for internationalization came from Brazil. We have tons of networks in Brazil, and they are very active. 1/3 of them are even registered in PeeringDB. And they said it would be great if we could have PeeringDB also in Portuguese, Brazilian. And that was the reason for us to finally last year to bring PeeringDB in other languages. And meanwhile, we have more or less, there is a whole procedure behind it to get PeeringDB in other languages. Unfortunately, I cannot read this. There is even somewhere, I guess, an Indian dialect I have never heard of before. Let me just check it. No, it's too small. I can't read it. So there are, besides English, I guess there are a lot of Indian dialects if you want to get a little bit more familiar with PeeringDB and also your translation skills. Please just register with PeeringDB, open an issue, and say I want to translate it to this language. This is the procedure how to do it. As said, open an issue, and then say, okay, I want to translate it to this language local, and then we will check it out, everything to you. So this is from my side. This is a slide with more information on PeeringDB, and happy to take questions, remarks, suggestions, whatever. Thank you.